give me a thumbs up if this is working. Where's our family? Where's our family? Yeah? Can somebody ask them to come in? Oh, here we come. All right.
Yes.
Come on up, Edie. So we have a little presentation tonight. In 2024, the Town of Normal Water Department held its first ever water cover art contest. And the contest was open to 3rd through 5th graders in the community. A lot of artists and students who care about the water supply entered. We received over 250 submissions for this contest. And tonight, we're here to honor Nidhi Patel, right? Thank you. A student in Mrs. Gannert's 4th grade class at Cedar Ridge Elementary School. Congratulations on winning here. Your winning entry will grace us the cover of the town's annual water report. Your piece entitled "Water is Life" captured the imagination of the community, who voted through social media, and ultimately the council, who selected the winning entry. We appreciate what you've done and what water means to you. And thanks for your talent. You're an amazing artist for a 10-year-old. And we're going to give you that, which is a framed copy of your artwork that you submitted, and a gift card. So a round of applause for you. Well done. You want to say anything? You don't have to, but if you want to.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very succinct, to the point. Thank you. Congratulations.
I was gonna say parent.
Oh, yeah, would the family like to take a picture? Yeah, we'll be very quick.
She's little nervous. You can show like.
John, get in there.
Nice try, John.
Okay, everybody look at me. Awesome. Thank you.
Congratulations, Jeff. Call to order a meeting for the Normal Local Liquor Commission. Please call the roll.
Mayor Kus,
Here.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Here.
Ms. Harris,
Here.
Mr. Byers,
Here.
Ms. Smith,
Here.
Mr. Preston,
Here.
Mr. McCarthy.
Here.
First item of business is approval of minutes of the special meeting of March 18th, 2024.
Move approval.
Second.
Changes or comments? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Ms. Harris,
Aye.
Mr. Byers,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye. Minutes are approved. We have one license application. That's for 21 Years LLC, doing business as Busa's Gaming Lounge and Cafe, 1520 East College Avenue, Suite M in Normal.
Move approval.
Thank you.
Second.
And requesting a Class C beer and wine only on-premise liquor license at, again, 1520 College Avenue. Comments or? Please call the roll.
Ms. Harris,
Aye.
Mr. Byers,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye. The license is approved. A motion for adjournment, please.
So moved.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mr. Mr. Byers.
Aye.
Ms. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Preston.
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy.
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz.
Aye.
Ms. Harris.
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye, we are adjourned. Call to order a meeting for the Normal Town Council for Monday, May 6, 2024. Please call the roll.
Mayor Kus.
Here.
Mrs. Lorenz.
Here.
Ms. Harris.
Here.
Mr. Byers.
Here.
Ms. Smith.
Here.
Mr. Preston.
Here.
Mr. McCarthy.
Here.
We'll begin with a pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the
Flag of the United States of America.
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have no public comment prior to the start of the meeting, so we go to the omnibus agenda. Items that will be taken with a single vote unless a council member would like to pull an item for discussion. Ms. Harris?
Yes, I would like to pull items G and I would like to be excused from any bills I've incurred.
Ms. Lorenz?
I'd like to pull item J.
I'd like to pull item E. Karen.
Motion for approval, please. Oh, one more.
I'd like to be excused from voting on any items I incurred as expenses in my duty as councilman.
Motion for approval, please.
So moved.
Second.
Items considered under omnibus tonight are approval of the minutes of the regular council meeting of April 15th, 2024, a report to receive and file town of normal expenditures for payment as of May 1st, 2024, a resolution to accept bids and award a contract to Freehill Asphalt Incorporated for the 2024 crack and joint filling project in the amount of $43,228. A resolution approving a public utility easement at 311 South Veterans Parkway having to do with the Raising Canes. Resolution to accept bids and award a contract to Twin City Electric Incorporated for the Constitution Trail Lighting Project at the County Link Amphitheater in the amount of $34,950. And a resolution authorizing the renewal of the town's participation in the Municipal Insurance Cooperative Agency insurance program for plan year 2024-2025 and an associated budget adjustment. Please call the roll.
Mrs. Lorenz.
Aye.
Ms. Harris.
Aye.
Mr. Byers.
Aye.
Ms. Smith.
Aye.
Mr. Preston.
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy.
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye, those items are approved. Item E is a resolution waiving the formal bidding process and authorizing a contract with Donaldson Construction Company, LLC, for a pilot project application of pressure paved pavement preservation in the amount of $373,873.05. Ms.
So moved.
Second.
Smith?
Yes, this project is another repaving project to extend the life. And I had contacted City Manager Reese and asked her for some comparison to a project we approved last year. Is it the same technique, or the test we did last year was successful, and so we're finding that this is what we're going to use going forward with this type of road surface?
Well, we are still early in the process. We're still piloting this. So with 1 year, I don't know that we're going to say it was a success or a failure. I think we're leaning towards success. We want to continue this pilot. You'll note that on the agenda tonight and recent agendas, council has been asked to approve multiple strategies for our pavement work. Some has been resurfacing projects. Some have been the crack and joint filling on a prior item tonight, and now we have this pressure pave system. We believe that it's worthwhile to continue to try do additional streets with the pressure pave system, and so we're continuing on the pilot that we started last year.
And being an accountant, I I took the total cost and divided it by the number of miles and came up with $166,165 per mile for this type of repair. How does that compare to a total repave?
While that's a pricey per mile cost, it is still significantly less than resurfacing or repaving a street. Resurfacing or repaving would be about 4 times that cost.
And even though we're extending the life, ultimately, any of the roads that we're doing this on will ultimately need to be repaved at some point in the future, but we're hoping just to push that out, correct?
Correct. We believe this particular strategy for pavement preservation gives us an additional 10 years or so. So we want to continue this pilot and see if that's how it actually plays out.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Item? Ms. Lorenz?
Just a point of clarification. Is the pilot the pavement preservation idea, or is the pilot the technique that's being used? Because I noticed that this is, like you said, different than the crack joint sealing.
Right. It's a technique.
So the technique is being piloted.
Correct.
Okay, but our policy is to do pavement preservation.
Absolutely.
Got it. Thank you.
Please call the roll.
Ms. Harris,
Aye.
Mr. Byers,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye. That item is approved. Item G is a resolution authorizing annual support of the Small Business Development Center, also known as the SBDC.
Move
Ms. Harris.
approval.
Second?
Harris?
Thank you. I wanted to bring this up. I have spoken on this before as members of our community of color have come to me and have spoke on the fact they have not been able to receive assistance from SBDC, but has been using the Minority Business Development Center, that was founded by Denise Moore, who is not even a member of our community. She's out of Peoria. I bring this up because we are going to give funds and support them, but I need to be assured as we move forward that there's an awareness that they, have not made a good impression to some of our own residents and constituents who are looking to be small business owners. And they have not, I think there has been some, but I've had quite a few come to me who have not been supported by SBDC, but been supported by this Minority Business Development Center. So there are concerns on us being able to service at all of our residents, especially those of color who are interested in being entrepreneurs.
I appreciate that. I cannot talk to the specifics of how the certain populations are being served, but I will, with Mayor's agreement, I'll ask the director, Sarah Gliege, to come forward. I think she is prepared to talk about the services that SBDC is providing and how they're growing in the area of serving all services. Any of the 3 chairs.
Oh,
Thank
cool.
you.
Okay. I just actually was at a meeting with Denise on the State of Bloomington Breakfast, and we are actually working together to create some programming at the Minority Business Development Center. I, too, have also heard that we could be doing a better job making sure that our services are equitably distributed throughout the community. And to address that, we had identified and hired a minority business advisor. We have grown our what would be identified as a minority business, which is Native American, Asian Pacific Americans, Asian Indian, African American, and Hispanic from probably 2 or 3 to 265. But I also think, and this is a larger conversation, that we are working with the EDC and the McLean County Chamber of Commerce, is that just access to services within this community for minority businesses is across the board subpar. I think access to capital, access to professional services needs to be improved. And to that end, we are working really hard to make sure that we are doing our due diligence to make sure that those that need access to entrepreneurial services and to be able to start a small business are able to do so. We refer frequently to the Minority Business Development Center because as it stands here, it's more of a job training, kind of computer work, job skills type of thing. And a lot of the times for some of our clients meet us at a point where we as the SBDC are not tasked quite yet with, they don't have an idea for a business yet, they just know they want to own a business. And so they maybe lack some computer or technology skills, and so we try to work with the Minority Business Development Center. But they do have a business boot camp that they do over the course of 8 weeks. We will be participating in that to make sure that we're explaining how to write a business plan, what banks are looking for when you're looking at access to capital. We do not have non-traditional financing in this community, which I think is a big barrier to entry for a lot of people that identify as an underserved or minority community. And so, again, I fully acknowledge that we have a lot of work as a community to do. The SBDC is happy to hear and listen to anyone that feels as though maybe our services were not geared towards them, and we will make the adjustments necessary.
I guess my only other question is, I know that you talked about doing one project with the minority business. Do you look to do some others so that some of those funds, because you all are getting the funds, they're not.
Correct.
But
They have
that means
different
it's still
funding.
we're not technically still servicing that group of people if you're getting the money, but they're the ones who's helping them. So are you looking to have at least some focused monies to make sure that there's some connection between the dollars that we're approving are helping that minority business program, that even though, I mean, I know you're doing some of the programming,
you.
but we know that's a very small amount compared to the significant amount we're providing.
Yes. I actually just spoke with Vivian Doctora, who Denise hired as her person here in town to run, because as you spoke to, she does live in Peoria, and so she's doing a lot of driving back and forth. So we are looking, and I spoke with Denise about creating programming about, we get asked a lot about how to access capital, how to make themselves bankable. We're working with the SBA on that, on a series of conversations and workshops for that through the Minority Business Development Center, as well as how to write a grant. We get a lot of questions about how can I get grant money to start my business, which isn't really a thing, but I do want people to feel empowered to pursue funding opportunities within the community. And so we have made some connections and some plans for this coming up year. I think there's 4 different opportunities for us to be at the Minority Business Development Center. We were going to host something, can't remember what it is right now, but we were going to host another event there simply because it has the most parking, it's equitable access. We understand as us at a university, we're not always the easiest place to find, and so we're working on being more in the community as opposed to people coming to us.
Thank you.
They're on this item? Ms. Lorenz?
Yeah, thank you. Couple of thoughts, and I don't know whether I'll put the question out there, but it has, my question has to do with the missed grant cycle, us being the grantors. So what caused the miss in that grant application, and was it missed because I think Bloomington is your other major funder?
Correct.
Okay. So
And the state of Illinois.
okay, so tell me more about how that happened, and I don't know who answers that.
Sure, I'll start. Mr. Hune might want to supplement, and maybe Ms. Gliggy. We had a 3-year agreement with SBDC for funding, along with Bloomington having a similar 3-year agreement. In fiscal year 23-24, we had budgeted funds to support SBDC, but our agreement had expired. Unbeknownst to us, I guess it wasn't on our radar to renew the agreement at the time, and I think with some transitions in staff, I don't believe it was until just recently where we were invoiced for 23-24, but we're now into our fiscal year 24-25, so we're now looking, going back to make sure we cover fiscal year 23-24 and make it current in terms of our funding. Our agreement had expired, and we did not get an invoice, and we did not pay.
Okay. And so the invoice is supposed to come from SBDC, but maybe due to transition in leadership or something?
We have a lot of different entities that kind of have their hands in the SBDC, and so our director ended up departing suddenly, so there was 0 transition and handover.
Okay.
Also, the community relations individual who is now at the EDC had formerly done all of the communication between the city and the town, which I believe were in the form of kind of emails, and he didn't pass on that paperwork. it just came to my attention, and again, I feel like I'm still trying to make sure that we're getting all of our ducks in a row. City of Bloomington has a different timeline budget year than does the town of Normal, than does the academic calendar at Wesleyan, and then the state of Illinois, who is our match for the money, is also, I could tell you all of them because I know them now, but we were unaware that we were out of that cycle, much less that had not continued on. So the two main people that had kind of negotiated those things had assured me that everything was fine, and then they left, and then we literally just realized that by the time we had invoiced for this last year, which is still our fiscal year, we had dropped the ball on sending that invoice. It was 100% the SBDC's fault.
Well, I was just going to summarize. I think it was something, it just fell through the cracks on all of our parts. It was budgeted. We didn't have an agreement. We didn't come to council to renew the agreement. And so again, just kind of fell through the cracks. The action tonight makes us whole, makes SBDC whole for the payment last year that we missed in terms of support, but it was budgeted. And then moving forward, a new 3-year agreement.
Okay. And what was budgeted last year?
I believe it was the full 63,000.
Okay, so that dollar amount hasn't
Correct.
changed. Okay. Okay, so thank you for answering those questions on that process. I guess in light of what Ms. Harris just said, I'm glad you brought those issues up. I kind of wonder if and this is just an observation, being on a campus is sometimes hard to navigate. And can be intimidating. Where do I park?
100%.
Where do I find all the buildings look alike? So I don't know if that maybe could be a contribution to maybe some barriers that people might feel.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
And to that end, I think, the state of Illinois has created these economic empowerment centers, and the purpose of them was to be in the underserved communities. The problem is that when they fund these small business development things or economic empowerment centers, they do not provide money for rent or a building. And so what happens is it usually falls to an institution of higher education to house those people, for instance, and then they kind of foot the bill until the state reimburses. So for instance, like in 2022, we received $0 from the state of Illinois, and we got our first payment from the state of Illinois in June of 23. So should you be anywhere else without kind of that safety net of the higher education institution, some are located at economic development centers, some are located at Chamber of Commerce. Sometimes there's a little bit of conflict of interest when those things happen, but that tends to be the issue, is that across the board when they are funding these things, they're funding for salaries and programming and not for building, rent, utilities. So I don't disagree with you. Gabby, our business advisor and our assistant director, has really done a great job of bringing people onto the campus after hours to make them feel empowered to come into Illinois Wesleyan's campus. But she's also hosted stuff with the Immigration Project out in the community. And again, we're going to be working with the Minority Business Development Center because we do recognize that it is 100% a barrier to access. So we are very aware.
Okay. Thank you for being aware of that. Not asking you to fix it tonight, so.
But it is to that end also, we have started doing some how to write a business plan classes at the Normal Public Library, just because it's a more equitable, easy access space. We would like to do the same thing with the Bloomington Library. I mean, our purpose is to make sure that we are contributing access and having access for anyone who wants to start a small business. The problem is then sometimes, when we have clients who maybe have an idea that's not sustainable or they don't have capital for it, we can't be telling people, yes, please invest your life savings into a business when you don't have the target market data and or your pricing. So we do have to have hard conversations sometimes, but we always want to make sure that we're offering education and opportunity to come back, and we'll work with you as you scale or, your business idea grows.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Preston.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks for that clarification. I had questions similar to both Councilwoman Harris and Lorenz on that, and on both pieces of those. I guess one item that I would recommend is in looking both at our council report, as well as the annual report from the SBDC that is attached, there isn't much outcome data presented, and for the investment that the town, and I would think the city would be equally interested in, is making in the SBDC, having some kind of metric beyond just the number of clients served and the number of meetings that were had, but ultimately how many new businesses
I have those
incorporated
numbers.
as a result, how many jobs were created, and the like.
I do have some of those numbers here if you're interested in them. They didn't make our
Sure.
annual report. Okay, just just read the ones that pertain to the town of Normal. So we would really like to be able to share kind of some of the businesses that we work with, but we're under the SBA federal confidentiality agreement. But so for the town of Normal, I had 51 clients from Normal. Gabriella had 66, and our new business advisor had 55. I believe these were, I don't have, we had new business starts, and I'm looking for those really quickly. Okay, here, nope, that's not it either. We had assistance for, nope, that's not it. I apologize. I'm happy to add that as an addendum for any of you to review. But you know, we have had several business starts. There's a difference for the SBA between someone's registering their LLC and actually opening their doors and creating, you know, revenue within the community. We have had a lot of at-home e-commerce businesses. We have an industry list right here. So I apologize if that's not in the annual report, but I'm happy to send all of the information that I've sent to Pam onto that's a finer breakdown. But I completely agree. We're happy to share whatever metrics demonstrate our impact.
Yeah, no, I think it'd be great information to have. I mean, for us, but ultimately for the residents of Normal who support the mission and want to know what their investment of tax dollars is going toward.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Further? Please call the roll.
Mr. Byers,
Aye.
Ms. Smith,
Aye.
Mr. Preston,
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy,
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz,
Aye.
Ms. Harris,
Aye.
Mayor Kus.
Aye, that item is approved. Item I is a resolution authorizing a contract with Pearl Technologies LLC for the replacement of council chamber audio-visual equipment and 5 years of managed service for the total amount of $256,017.47.
Move approval.
Second.
Thank
Ms.
you.
Harris?
Yes, I wanted to bring this up because I know there's been conversations about some of this. One, because we've had some hard times hearing each other up here on the dais, so this is good news to see. But one of the things that I want us to be thinking about, and I have some questions around, is will this technology allow for compatibility for future technologies to come? And is it also with the foresight that of the possibility of us expanding like public comment virtually and having some of those pieces being added into the future?
Yes, Ms. Harris, our Innovation and Technology Department, I think, is looking to be visionary on this, so to deal with existing problems, replace the system, and then set it up so that the investment is long-term and be able to take into account however council wants to convene meetings in the future in terms of hybrid, even if council members are absent for a reason where they can participate hybrid, in a hybrid style, or perhaps if council wanted to have some alternate in terms of the public comment approach. But I think that this new system is our attempt to be solving problems and visionary to set us up so that it is a good investment for the future.
And then I know I saw something on, let me pull it, on the availability on instruction, or let me make sure I say it correctly, for technical support. What extent, how long would that go? Because I know on one of them it gave the specifics, but then on the other it didn't. So wanted to
I think the contract is 5 years of managed services, which, I do want to thank our INT, Innovation and Technology staff, Vasu, Alondre, the folks that have kept us going every 2 weeks here, and they are equally excited as council is to get a new system. They've done a great job, but this 5 years of managed services will help keep us continuing to progress the system and accommodate whatever changes we want to have in terms of our public meetings.
Thank you, that covers it.
Mr. McCarthy and then Mr. Preston.
Thank you. I'd also like to thank Scott Araju and staff, and hopefully I won't have to do this anymore and lean over into my mic and look up over top of my glasses. It was commend finding a vendor who's willing to do 24/7 service. Hopefully we don't need 24/7 in this room, but unless our council meetings start to go much longer, and start earlier, but I hope not. Can you talk us through a little bit about what this looks like in implementation? I'm assuming we'll some critical mass of get most of it done before or between, or do we have to take a pause and do a meeting someplace else or anything like that?
No, we should not have to meet remotely anywhere or, move a location. This is a little bit of a longer term process. I'd like to say it's going to be ready for the next meeting, but unfortunately it is not. We want to make sure we are thoughtful with the planning of how we want this room to function, how our public meetings occur, not only for council, but all of the public bodies. The planning commission meets in here, zoning board, things like that. So the first phase is the design, working with Pearl Technologies and our innovation and technology staff for the design and the planning, then ordering the appropriate equipment and pieces, and it could be 12 to 14 weeks delivery on the hardware. And then, of course, there's the software implementation, everything behind the curtain that makes the equipment function. You'll see ultimately replacement of the screens and all sorts of new technology in this room. And so we say, at least 3 months before we're done with the work. We do not anticipate having to relocate any of our meetings.
Wonderful, and I'm assuming the replacement of the screens is the LED, getting the nod from Ms. Scataraju. That will be a substantial upgrade and visibility for the public. Thanks for the work on this, and I know it's been a long slog for you guys.
Preston.
Thanks. I would like to start by commending INT staff for making our current system work as long as it has. It's been between 12 and 13 years for this equipment, and as I think about my own life, I would be surprised if many of us have technology at home, maybe other than a TV, that we are still utilizing the same equipment, phone, computer that we were 13 years ago. Kevin still has his BlackBerry over here, so maybe he did. That aside, I know it's not always the easiest to manage. As someone who has had a hand mic, had a lapel mic, and different things, and received emails from constituents that they couldn't hear comments of mine during council meetings as a result of the technology. I'm sure that is frustrating for staff to have to try and manage, as well as frustrating for constituents who care what's said and done up here. And so thanks for sticking with it, and I know we'll all be looking forward to increasing transparency with our new technology.
Further? Please call the roll.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Ms. Harris?
Aye.
Mr. Byers?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. That item is approved. Item J is a resolution authorizing an agreement with Balcones Midwest LLC doing business as Midwest Fiber Recycling for the operation of a Dropbox recycling program, authorizing a cost-sharing intergovernmental agreement with the City of Bloomington and McLean County, and authorizing an associated budget adjustment. Ms. Lorenz.
So move, please.
Second.
Thank you. Yeah, my question has to do with the dollars increase here, a budget adjustment of 26,640. That turns out to be around 15 or 17% increase. I didn't see, or maybe I overlooked it, any explanation that was offered by the vendor for that?
Yes, I'm sorry for not being a little more specific in the report about the justification for the cost increase. This particular vendor is operating to perform the drop box services that the city, county, and town are all funding. The agreement is specifically with the town, but then we have the contract for the services are held by the town. The service is funded in a cost-sharing matter with city, county, and town. The reason for this rather significant cost increase, though, is generally just the cost of doing business. I checked with Public Works, and that's the information we have through conversations with Midwest Fiber in the last 3 years or so. As we've all experienced with cost of equipment and just the cost of products, their cost of doing business has increased. So that is reflected in this new agreement. And I just wanted to point out to council that we are the last party to adopt the agreement. City and the City of Bloomington and McLean County have already adopted the agreement, so we appreciate their support for this service.
Okay. And then at some point, the 176,640 per year, we're reimbursed for 2/3 of that by those other two partners, right?
Correct.
Okay, very good. Thank you. That's all I had.
Further on that item. Please call the roll.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Ms. Harris?
Aye.
Mr. Byers?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye, that resolution is approved. That concludes our omnibus tonight. We have no general orders, 2 items of new business, and the first is an ordinance establishing license requirements for retail tobacco shops.
Move approval.
Second.
Discussion on this item?
Mayor Cruz, if I could jump in with just some introductory comments. This particular item is brought before council under new business tonight. Staff is asking council to adopt an ordinance where establishing license requirements for retail tobacco shops. In the ordinance and in the council report, we've identified the criteria of how to identify a tobacco shop. We're not talking about a just general grocery store or retailer that sells multiple things, of which tobacco is one of the many items, but a retail shop that focuses primarily on tobacco and tobacco-related products. I think the council report is rather thorough. One question I have received prior to tonight's meeting was, how does this particular action item fit in with council's prior action to initiate a zoning text amendment as it pertains to tobacco? Where staff is prepared to talk about that. In a nutshell, that particular zoning text amendment is still going through the process for public input. It will be addressed by the Planning Commission, and it will then, once the Planning Commission makes a recommendation on that zoning text amendment, it will come back to council for final action. That zoning text amendment was proposed a couple months ago, and it pertains solely to the Uptown zoning district. This particular action item tonight is separate, but could be linked. But it is separate action asking council to consider retail licensing, which would be managed by the city clerk's office, and this would be town-wide. So I'll then staff will be prepared to answer any questions council may have, but I just thought that kind of introduction might be helpful.
Thank you. That was helpful. Mr. Byers?
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I think, quick question. I know in reading through the report, it sounds like there was maybe some comparative research done, and just kind of wanted to know, generally, maybe kind of what are other municipalities doing in terms of, 1, licensing or no licensing, and then 2, I know there's kind of some different regulations in here. Are we kind of on par, lighter, more stringent, or just kind of in general speak to that comparative research process?
We can. I'm going to delegate to Mr. Day.
The answer to your question is yes. We've looked at a number of comparable communities, both in Illinois and throughout the country. This is fairly standard for ones that regulate just smoke shops. We're lighter than most communities who have license requirements for any tobacco sales. So if you're a grocery store, station, anybody who sells tobacco has to go through the license process. So most communities, at least larger, our size communities, have that type of regulation. We're lighter than that in that we're only looking at specific retailers rather than just anybody who sells tobacco. So in that instance, we're regulating, let's say, less stringently than many communities do. In terms of some of our other stuff, we've looked through ordinances both in Illinois and around the country, come up with pretty much comparable provisions that they've got in their ordinances.
And if I could jump in, some of the criteria here in terms of the requirements, I should say, not criteria, but the requirements in terms of separation from schools and the distances from school or daycare, that is pulled from the cannabis retailers, isn't it?
Yeah, we use the cannabis retailers as the basis for the distance requirements for tobacco shops.
Okay. Yeah, I was trying to remember, is the 1,500 feet between locations, is that the same as cannabis as well? Okay.
Mr. Preston?
Thanks, Mayor. A question for staff. In reading through the report, can I get some clarity on the definition of what businesses will be subject to getting this license? I know in the report it mentioned just 15% or more of store retail area being devoted to tobacco or nicotine products, but then in the actual ordinance itself, it looked like it defined a retail tobacco store. And where I'm going with this is, do we have any gas stations or other small convenience shops that by retail floor area would have 15% or more devoted to nicotine products, but not be that not be their main purpose, obviously, in business, and would they be subject to this?
If I understand your question, so it's just down to the 15%. I think there was an earlier version of a draft that we had looked at that had, it was 15% or a certain amount of shelf space. Got rid of that, it's only down to the 15% display area. So that's the only thing, so we're not looking at other shelving requirements which may have caught up some other types of stores. So it's going to be basically down to the percentage of display area that you're dedicating to these regulating smoking products.
So
Right. I'm sorry.
Yeah, please.
From our understanding, there's 9 retailers in town that this would apply to. So gas stations or the like would not be subject to this. So it is just the 9 retailers that really are what we have often referred to. They're many times they're referred to as smoke shops, but tobacco retailers.
Okay, yeah. Thanks.
Mr. McCarthy?
Thanks, Mayor. Great questions. Thanks for getting those out of the way. I guess off the top, I'll just say I like where we're going with this. I think it aligns with the town's longstanding emphasis on health and wellness and our more recent attempts to limit exposure, sales, and consumptions by minors. I think that's the overwhelming benefit of this work, albeit not perfect. I think by putting in some kind of limitation on location and density, we're able to achieve that. And I like that it's citywide and consistent with other rules, as Mr. Day pointed out, consistent with our cannabis rules and some of those in our alcohol ordinances as well. And based on location and density and proximity, rather than us being asked to come up with a magic number of locations. I don't like that, particularly that approach. I think this allows retailers flexibility to open shop where they decide it's best, and also provides for the flexibility if our community continues to grow, that more licenses are possible. And another reason why I like going by this, that we have some protections and able to control density, but still allow for business owners doing a legal business that we want sold to adults to be able to thrive. I'm going to pause there. I've potentially got another question, but I'm going to let everybody else speak now. Thanks.
Ms. Lorenz?
Oh, okay. Thank you. So the March 4th action, which was the zoning text amendment, and tonight's activities or item, it's easy to conflate them. And I'll be honest, even in my own mind, I had begun to conflate them. So I'm glad we have separated them out. The March 4th action was to set in motion a potential change that would go through the public process of zoning. That would go through the Planning Commission, I believe. And it was specifically for Uptown. Tonight's action is not changing zoning, but it is, and it is not just specific for Uptown, but for the entire town. I'm wondering if does tonight's actions, because it also does specify distance requirements and so forth, does that kind of negate the need to do the zoning change that we set in motion a few weeks ago?
Well, it's possible. I guess I would recommend that we allow that process to play out, because for the zoning text amendment that we had proposed and would like for public input and have public process for that, that pertained to acceptable uses in the Uptown district.
Me too.
And so that could be more limiting ultimately for Uptown. I'm not prepared to say let's rescind that and let's cancel that process. I think we should still let the process go through and find out what public input is regarding the allowable uses in the Uptown zoning district and let that play out. But if, I suppose for current, and I'm looking at Mr. Day, I suppose for current tobacco shops in Uptown, they would remain in existence even if a zoning text amendment occurred. If a zoning text amendment occurred, we're talking about future zoning or future tobacco shops, correct?
Right. So, yeah, there's a couple answers to your question, but certainly with respect to the zoning issue that's going before the Plan Commission, that is just to remove tobacco shops as a permitted use in Uptown. So the ones we have now would become what we call non-conforming uses, which would be allowed to continue up until they stop, and then they wouldn't be replaced. So the ultimate goal for the zoning would just be to remove the tobacco shops as a permitted use in all of Uptown licensing. When it comes to the Planning Commission, the licensing matter will probably be a factor for the Planning Commission to consider. The Planning Commission has to go through their list of factors about things they have to look over when they're looking at a zoning decision. We call them the LaSalle factors. There's a number of things they have to look at. This would probably be something that would factor into the decision, which is why it hasn't hit the Planning Commission yet. So it'll be something that they'll look at, but they are ultimately, in the end, two different actions.
Okay. So follow up if I can. You know, and maybe this is more of a statement rather than a question. Probably why this is getting some of the discussion that it is that, you know, what we're kind of grappling with here is regulation and maybe, you know, the long arm of government reaching too far into business. We like not to do that too often, right? You know? And so I just want us to be mindful of what we are doing and what we're not doing tonight. And, you know, zoning, and we'll have to deal with that when that comes before the Planning Commission and then ultimately us. We'll have to deal with, I think, a more strict and a more heavier approach where we're saying this type of business cannot happen there. So for tonight, I don't feel it's as heavy-handed, especially in light of we have a precedence here. We license other, I'm going to call them vice activities, right? Things that, you know, tend to have been once upon a time illegal and now legal. So like alcohol. And here's the question I thought of. Do we require license fees for gaming? Yes, okay, I thought we did. So in a way, this feels like more of a, gosh, why haven't we been required license for tobacco shops in the past? And I think what I've ascertained from the report is that tobacco shops, you know, your grandfather's tobacco shop is not the tobacco shop of today. And because, in my opinion, it seems that the now recreational use of cannabis being legalized, you're starting to see some more creative products in tobacco shops. It's not just, you know, cigars and pipes and cigarettes. So I think that's what's causing us, or at least in my mind, to feel like this is in line with what we have done in the past. We have required licenses for vice-like activities. As far as what I can tell, the providers of liquor are some of the most heavily charged businesses. I mean, you know, I think we're talking 200 here, add a zero to some of the restaurants and bars who serve alcohol. So, you know, that's kind of interesting that there's a 10x difference between what we charge you know, a pub to serve beer and alcohol and other spirits perhaps, and then these other activities. So in my mind, not to create more work, but it's almost like at some point when we have nothing else to do, right? Maybe we do need to go through the codes of licensing and make sure that it all aligns, and make sure that we're not being overly burdensome, but at the same time trying to strike that balance of what has been sort of our brand and our tradition in this community to be, let's face it, you know, more prudent and more careful, and wanting to preserve the safety, if you will, and the friendliness of the town and the community. And, you know, essentially making a judgment about these vice-like activities is what I call them. So tonight alone as a fee assessment doesn't bother me as much as maybe the next step, which would be more of a zoning change. And we'll have to just let that play out and see how that happens. But not lost on me is the fact that this is a regulation, and I'm not usually terribly in favor of government getting in the business of business. But in this case, I think it's consistent with what we are doing with other similar types of products and services. So that's my statement. Thank you.
Ms. Smith.
Just a question for clarification. In my email with the city manager, when I was asking about the existing businesses, and I was assured that they would be grandfathered in, as Mr. Day pointed out, but going forward, they would be subject to paying the license fee every year?
That is correct, but they wouldn't have to pay it immediately. They have a year to get their license, the existing businesses.
Okay, thank you.
Clear on this item? Mr. Byers.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Just a couple of comments before we go to vote here. I think that this kind of subject, I think, as Ms. Loren said, of kind of regulating really tobacco, marijuana, and alcohol has been a lot over this last year since I came onto council. And actually, I think a year ago was the first council meeting I had, and we had several marijuana dispensaries. And so we had a lot of robust debate as to how to regulate, I think, some of these vice activities. And I've always kind of tried to weigh, how much regulation is fair and how much is too much. And as I've kind of been trying to wrap my head around the licensing proposal tonight and some of the conversation we had a month or so ago about the zoning text amendment, which is still going to play out. Again, it's always in the back of my head that, there are, setbacks and distance requirements that we are applying to marijuana dispensaries. And, now, if this is passed tonight, to tobacco shops that just, again, places that serve alcohol, which have a ton of negative externalities. People go in and may get drunk and do things. There's a lot of negatives that come from that, but we don't apply that same regulation. And maybe some of that is just kind of stigma and the way things shake out. So I think where I'm landing ultimately tonight is I think that this licensing proposal is fine. I will support it, but I do think that this is enough, and I would not like to see us, support, further regulation. But again, we'll wait to see how the public process plays out. So thanks.
Further on the item? Please call the roll.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Ms. Harris?
Aye.
Mr. Byers?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mayor Kus?
Aye. The ordinance is approved. Item 8 is a presentation by McLean County Regional Planning Commission.
Thank you, Mayor Kus. While Mr. Lai and Mr. Adams from McLean County Regional Planning come forward, I'll do a quick introduction of this topic on your agenda. McLean County Regional Planning Commission has been working diligently on the topic that we have discussed many, many times and the community is discussing, and it has to do with housing. And they have prepared a robust housing recovery plan. It's like I said, it's a robust plan. It's about 75, 76 pages. And so we did not include the actual hard copy of the plan in your council packet this evening, but we did attach a link. So anyone who's looking at our website or Regional Planning's website should be able to find a link to the plan if they want to peruse it. And council, I think, will be interested in hearing what Mr. Lai and Mr. Adams have to say. And then I'm sure they'll be prepared to answer any questions you may have. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Lai.
Thank you very much. Good evening, excuse me, Mayor and members of the council, also city manager and staff members. Thank you for the opportunity to allow us, members of the McLean County Regional Planning Commission, to have the opportunity to present you the Regional Housing Recovery Plan. I'm Ray Lai. As pointed out, I'm the Executive Director for the MCRPC. And with me, Mark Adams is one of our committee planners with MCRPC. And I want to extend our appreciation for members of the town staff and also a member of the town council, although under different head, to serve on the project steering committee of this very important project that affects the entire community. So what is the Regional Housing Recovery Plan? It was actually started all with a grant that we received from DCEO, the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Development. And with that, there was a 7-month planning process that went through that we worked with the steering committee and with members of the public and many of the stakeholders. Okay, we'll try again.
Help is on the way.
Seems like it froze or something.
Thank you.
Magic touch.
All right. So the plan was adopted by the Regional Planning Commission back late March, but we did not get the dress-up version of the document from the consultants until about a couple of weeks ago. Really, the purpose of the plan is research and analysis, as well as recommendations, implementation strategies for recovery of the housing sector from the impact of the COVID-19 impact in McLean County. Went through a 7-month process that entails from discovery to data analysis, collection with public engagement, to a set of assessment and recommendations prepared by the consultant with a draft report, finally with a final report adopted by the Planning Commission. With the help, again, with the consultants and also the project steering committee. And there were like meetings and forums and many things that had happened. In terms of committee engagement, there were a lot of tools that we used to gather the public input from a household needs survey that we conducted for the entire region, and we received about 1,200 responses, so that's unusual. One-on-one interviews, group interviews, stakeholder workshops, public forum, a kind of a hybrid version, but standing room only back in one of the coldest days, back in January, a few months ago, and there were about 120 residents attended both virtually and in person. And subsequently, with the draft plan made available, we also allowed the public and encouraged the public to provide comments, and also after their review. And all this took place over a few months, really with the goal to collect input and feedback from the community members. This is just one of the survey questions. There were about 23 questions that we asked the public, and the complete results, if you're interested, is available on the MCRPC website if you're really interested in the details. This is just one sample question. Since the start of the pandemic, have you experienced any difficulty affording your housing costs? Right, the pie chart next to it just show about half and half actually, and so it's just one simple example. But if you're interested, there are more that you can look up. Like I said, it was a standing room only, January 9th. But we got really a diverse members and representation of the community who attended despite the code. And so we appreciate all the input and feedback provided. In addition to like a big group kind of gathering and doing what we call SWOT analysis, there were also smaller groups and tables set up that participants could provide their input. Key findings, from all those tools, from community engagement, limited affordability. Just as we all know, that's not enough housing options for different specific populations, such as the seniors and the young professionals. There was also limited housing diversity identified, meaning seems like single-family home is really the only housing type or the major one that's available. And so for people who are looking for other housing types, they don't have that many choices. Another key finding is the barriers to access the housing market, and that would include the upfront, high upfront costs, the predatory rental practices, and also lack of support of services, and that's creating a lot of challenges for certain populations. Another key finding is the competitive market, because of low vacancy rates and also the rising prices, it makes it difficult for buyers and renters to find suitable housing. Last but not least, there are other public concerns, including limited public transportation, between the house to the employment, and that is limited in depending where they live and where the employment locations are. The NIMBYism, the not in my backyard attitude, and also the need for diverse representation in future planning efforts. So just to highlight what we have heard from the community, from those tools or public engagement tools. The next few slides, just to give you a sense of the data reflecting different aspects related to housing. You'll find more charts and graphs in the report if you're interested. In terms of workforce housing shortage, Vivian, this just want to point out that because Vivian, but not just because of this particular employer, but just when there's an employer that all of a sudden bringing in a lot of jobs, that create a situation where there's shortage housing, when there's not enough to begin with in the community. And what that also could mean is people look for housing, and that means also we losing the potential for more tax base, if you will, because they would have to look somewhere else, right? And so that has some implications in terms of local municipalities. And also just to, on the graphs on the right-hand side, to show by categories and what the occupation for people who are in this different workforce sectors. And as you may already know, some people have to travel or commute every day a longer distance because they could not find housing near work. And Vivian is just one example, and some people may take more than 45 minutes one way just to go to work and back home. The next two graphs, one on the left-hand side for the city, and then the one on the right is regarding the town. These are housing units that have been approved and they're active. And just want to point out for the town Normal, and thank your staff, you're providing the information just to see the number of units being approved in terms of the single-family detached, the attached, single-family attached housing, multifamily. As you can tell, more detached single-family have been approved, and versus on the left-hand side is the Bloomington, they have approved more multifamily units, but less single-family detached, and then there's definitely less in terms of the single-family attached units. This slide shows for the unincorporated county, the new residential construction permit. You hopefully can see, because there's, apologize for the size of the letters, but then in the unincorporated part of the county, there has not been too many units, but primarily those units are single-family detached units that have been approved. The next two diagrams, one on the left is from the Housing Coalition report, basically reflecting two factors that you would know anyway, with rising homelessness rates per capita. One is the declining vacancy rate, and also because the housing cost, the rental housing cost escalating. But it's not just unique to our area. I mean, it's really, those two factors are pretty common in other areas as well. The graphs on the right-hand side is more from the national scene, basically reflecting per capita when the relationship between rental vacancy and also the number of unhoused or the homelessness persons. Next graphs, maps, charts, reflecting again as time goes from year 2000 to today. Basically, there's a drop in vacancy rate. Again, we have seen from around the same era that the rent per square foot has gone up, especially in the last few years. Rising home values equals to rising housing cost. These two graphs basically focus on what the housing cost burden to the people in the rental units. And the chart on the left-hand side is from ACS, American Community Survey, from U.S. Census Bureau, and then the vacancy rate also broken down between McKean County, City of Bloomington and Town of Normal in terms of the home vacancy rates. So they're pretty comparable in terms of the single-family home vacancy rates. Aging housing stock, we know majority of the houses are about 50, 60 years old, basically. That's what this chart is telling. It's hard to see it, but the 2020 or later, you can barely see it because there hasn't been that many. It's pretty new, but we haven't had that many new units. Also, in the last few years, we've seen more because the approval by the jurisdictions. We'll probably see more in coming years. Next, I'll turn over to Mark to go over the strategic recommendations that have been adopted by the Planning Commission. So, Mark.
Thank you, Ray. So we'll start off with the goals here. Thank you. And we're just going to focus on the high-level goals for this Regional Housing Recovery Plan. If you look in the implementation matrix on the last section of the plan, you'll get a breakdown of goals, actions, who could be responsible, different options there. But we're just going to focus on the high level, of course. So goal number 1 is to coordinate on regional resources. This includes, first and foremost, establishing an intergovernmental housing recovery implementation committee. TPMA consultants who we worked with did advise that there be appointed elected officials on that implementation committee so that there was a direct bridge between discussions that are happening in the implementation committee and making sure that the elected bodies are aware of those conversations. We also have defining specific goals and metrics and establishing performance tracking and reporting. One of my former jobs, I did evaluation planning. I know how important it is to report to your funders. So having the clear performance tracking and reporting and goal metrics, I can test, is very important. So the implementation committee would have that clear reporting to those who are involved. Partnership with regional planning organizations. This also just means that trying not to form an island, so reaching out to other partners and regional planning organizations and seeing what they're doing and keeping that connection. Goal number 2 is the housing coordinator. That it means hiring or assigning a housing coordinator. The term there can be reframed. It can be a housing policy analyst, housing planner, whatever that term may be. It just depends on how that implementation committee or the individual who is creating that to come up with that exact term. So the idea is the same, to basically have someone creating a resource guide for developers, those who are interested in developing housing, to also facilitate collaboration between stakeholders, and also using inventory for informed decision-making and resource allocation. So someone who's connecting the dots, helping identify different resources that are available to make housing more available. So goal number 3 is increase access to information and resources. This includes developing a centralized housing information hub, launching a housing education campaign, and extending the Housing Stability Navigator position. With the launching the housing education campaign, that just simply means illustrating to the public what affordable housing looks like, it can look like, and more importantly, why it's important in order to keep Bloomington Normal and McLean County family friendly and affordable, as we've always been. And then the Housing Stability Navigator, of course, many of you are aware, hopefully, that Mid-Central Community Action has housed this individual, and Housing Stability Navigator has done amazing work. And the goal here would be to extend that work, because we know that this solution will not come to us and it won't be solved overnight. So that Housing Stability Navigator works on a case management level, one-on-one with individuals who are precariously housed. And those individuals need basically direction to find something more intermediate, maybe long-term as well. Goal number 4 is expanding housing development opportunities, which includes conducting review of housing ordinances, establishing overlay districts, developing inclusionary zoning ordinances, and expanding housing mix options. This is definitely where the more legislative zoning work is to be done, but one thing that was pretty clear is that zoning can be a hindrance sometimes to affordable housing and just housing development. So things like an overlay district, where it's a little bit more digestible, you have a very small section of area that you're adding another zoning layer, so you can experiment or just see what can be possible. And inclusionary zoning, of course, is that either requirement or incentive to basically ensure that all housing projects, especially multifamily, have some sort of affordable units in it. So, goal number 5 is maximizing funding and partnerships. This includes establishing affordable housing trust fund, advocating for state-level economic development policies, supporting local land banks and community land trusts, and partnership opportunities for preservation and maintenance. The two that I'll call out there, Affordable Housing Trust Fund. There are many municipalities in the country that have this, and some of them will be shared regionally, shared within their own municipalities, but essentially it is just a pot that of money that accumulates, and basically the respective bodies delegate grants for that one specific purpose, and that is to promote and preserve affordable housing, whether that's single family, multifamily, anything in the middle. And the supporting the local land banks and community land trusts. There is the Central Illinois Land Bank Authority that's mentioned in the report, and they currently serve Danville, Champaign County, and Decatur. So they serve county and municipalities. And that Land Bank Authority will primarily serve in more slower markets. And those markets, basically, they need a developer to come in and really do a lot of rehab work and just get them into the hands, just get the keys into the hands of people so that more equity and value is being built. So that would be another tool. And then the Community Land Trust, as some of you are aware, I know I've mentioned this before in other circles, Bloomington Community Land Trust was formed in July of 2023. It's managed by an interim board of about 11 individuals, and that Bloomington Community Land Trust is currently applied for its 501c3, and we'll hopefully get that back from the feds later this year. And so goal 6, support vulnerable populations. This includes coordinating Illinois Housing Development Authority listening sessions and advocacy with stakeholders, securing and discussing the Behavioral Health Coordinating Council Mental Health Action Plan funding, as well as facilitating public endorsement facilitating public endorsement and match for low-income housing tax credit or LIHTC applicants with permanent supportive or PSH, permanent supportive housing units. And so with that, I'm just going to just briefly mention the Mental Health Action Plan that was adopted by McLean County. Pages 71 through 75 explicitly call out the support for affordable housing, and whether that means services or whether that means actual developing housing is explicitly stated in the Mental Health Action Plan that the Behavioral Health Coordinating Council looks to as a compass, if you will. And then I'll move on to the last slide here for strategic recommendations. Goal number 7 is increasing access to information and resources. This includes collaborating with employers to support housing, as well as initiate a landlord risk recovery fund. The landlord risk recovery fund, TPMA consultants did advise that it's really just a concept, but again, similar to the housing coordinator, it would be advised to find a term that may be a little bit more neutral and putting a positive label on this, but the idea, of course, is more conveyed here that there's a partnership and basically, again, a fund in which landlords are incentivized to house precariously housed individuals who have had issues staying in their homes, and that landlord needs an additional security deposit to basically pull from if there's any kind of financial risks involved. So again, that is the recovery fund. I will mention City of Rockford has one, and they've been very successful in that, and also reaching net zero homelessness as well, specifically for chronic and veteran homeless individuals. Okay, great. Turn it over to Ray.
So you wonder what's next, some of the next steps. It's not comprehensive. I just want to let you know, but we start a committee presentations, and including the town council, and again, thank you for the opportunity, is to educate the community, the different bodies, community organizations, governmental bodies, about this plan, what it means to the community. And there's a lot of stakeholders in the committee on the housing scene. So hopefully this plan would help to cut through everybody's perspectives and whatever, hopefully reflect what really the needs are and how we can go about addressing the housing issues. A formation of implementation committee, as Mark mentioned, that's one of the steps for implementation is to form this committee. But at this point, just be honest with you all, we don't know what we look at different models, we don't know what it's going to entail. This would take further conversations. But I just want to let you know this is important because, however, this will end up, this implementation committee will have to take this plan or the recommendations, now the adopted strategies, one step forward. So just want to let you know. And again, research on grant funding opportunities. As of today, we are aware of two already. One by the state of Illinois, DCO is on the implementation grant for this specific grants program. So we're looking at that, see if there's something could fit. Another grant is from the National Realtor Association. There might be a small chunk of money that may help us to do some further research. But we'll continuously look for those grant opportunities or other funding, may not be grants, just to help to fund, to see how the different recommendations and strategies could be carried out in the next step forward. So that's our presentation. Any questions, we'll be happy to take and try to answer.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. And Mr. Adams, questions? Start with Mr. Byers.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you, gentlemen, for the presentation. A lot of interesting information and insightful ideas, so appreciate the work that you guys did. I think it was goal number 5, I think it was a suggestion to advocate for or support, I think, state-level economic development policies, which I assume means, some sort of state-level economic development policies to help support, the construction of new housing, whatever type of housing that may be. I mean, is that something that should be looked at the local level, the municipal level, the county level? Should there be a more active role that, we as a town or, Bloomington or McLean County should be taking? Certainly you guys have the charts that show there's a lot of things that have been approved, but then the chart that, shows what has actually been built is very small, which I think is a common theme that we've all talked about. So, I mean, are there more things? Again, a lot of great goals and recommendations here, but from that perspective, in comparing other communities that you've studied or researched, is there more we could be doing to help, get new things built?
Yeah, on the state level, economic development, of course, the two main state agencies or state departments that would try to address housing is the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, and then the other is IHDA, is Illinois Housing Development Authority. For IHDA, they focus more on affordable housing, low moderate income population, and then for the DCEO, the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, they might look at a bigger picture in terms, including the market rate, what we call market. What you a lot of times have to decide where to approve certain private development. Like especially residential development or mixed use, sometimes that development that contains residential units. So in terms of the economic development policies, we work with EDC, Economic Development Council, as they stated in the recent public meeting. They're also having conversations with the state and how the developers, seems like there's interest in the local development community that want to look at not just on the market rate housing, but look at affordable housing. So that's encouraging. But you're right, it is one thing about the state programs or state policies. Actually, I think it would be more successful if there's some local incentives layered over with those state programs and incentives to make things happen. And again, it's incentives, it's enticement. And so, of course, the developers have to also put in the investment as well. So in terms of advocate, I think that's exactly what it is. There have to be organizations, there stakeholders to have conversations, to lobby with the state, to let the delegations, the state rep, or the members of the House to understand the housing needs in our area. If there's some specific ideas, then can be presented to them. Yeah.
I'm just going to add real quick a little bit of context too. So TPMA consultants had really brought this one to our attention especially, and the idea here is as you see your workforce grow, whether that is rebounding or you're just seeing rapid growth, there should be incentives that kind of run parallel to as that growth happens so that you're not playing catch up. And I think that's what we're seeing as an extreme version of catch up, if that is a game. So.
Yeah, and also on a personal level, I serve on the state housing task force. So if there were any opportunities for me to reflect the needs of our community, our area, definitely I do that. And also to understand what's going on for the rest of the state, to take that into consideration to whenever, to promote our area in terms of, hey, there's needs for a certain type of housing or whatever that can be done.
Thanks. And yeah, I think just to wrap my questions up, or really just my thoughts are, again, I think we're all, hoping that we get some interest rate cuts later this year that helps, spur the building of some of these projects that have been approved. But, certainly, a policy of wait, I think can only go so long. So I think there's definitely a conversation to be had. At what point are we more aggressive? At what point are we more bold in trying to get new housing supply in our local community? So again, appreciate you guys.
Yeah, we know we wish it's that easy because actually, say that the town council, you have approved many units, right? There are many other factors that come into play. Even if the developers want to build tomorrow, there's so many barriers that sometimes unanticipated of outside factors beyond their control that affect whether they want to proceed or not. Yeah.
Ms. Harris.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to try to make these questions and comments really brief. First of all, I want to say thank you for your presentation tonight. And this is something that I'm involved with at a more national level, but have been involved in for a long time. And hate that we're here. I will share that initially we asked for this to be a part of the initial infrastructure bill so that communities across the country wouldn't be here. But now we're here, so now we have to figure out how to move from here. In saying that, I would love to see if you all would add into number 5 that not only advocate for state level, but federal level. Because some of the hindrances that you're talking about, Ray, comes from the fact that we do have to push the federal government to get involved, and they have kind of been hands off. And those are the things where communities where we are ready, where we will give incentives, where we'll hit those roadblocks. So we would only be putting a Band-Aid over a gunshot wound if we don't really also have some federal level engagement as well and really push that. Next thing, I wanted some clarification because you said Rockford has a net zero homelessness. Is it saying that they have zero homeless?
No, there's a distinct difference. So
Okay.
Net zero just simply refers to that, first of all, it's just chronic, of course, so that means, the repeat, and then effective net zero just simply refers to the fact that homelessness is experienced in a very brief and non-repetitive manner. And so there's a specific definition, but it's very significant threshold for a COC to obtain. In fact, it may sound pretty doable, and there's many that have done it, but it's actually quite challenging.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. And then my next thing, it also kind of will play into little bit what I said for number 5 is I know we used a lot the terms of affordable housing and workforce housing, and I'll be honest, I have not gotten a chance to see the new final version of this because Mark, you and I have talked about the draft that was out there before. But I think I want to make sure that we have clarification on workforce housing and affordable housing, again, especially as we go and look at both definitely federal, but also state, when it comes to the term affordable housing, and we say that they have a very narrow mind because to them it's also equated to their view of what affordable housing is, and that's based off of the CDBG formula. So we want to make sure that we're not slighting ourselves if we're not calling out the different definitions in our plans and in our conversations with them. So just wanted to make sure that we do that because I think this is a very good base that we have here, and I think there's much we can do with this because I think if something is done and we really do push federally, we're in a good place to be able to absorb any funding, any help, any assistance that will come down the pike because we've done this work here. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks.
McCarthy.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you, Ray and Mark, for being willing to be point on trying to grab this issue by the tail. It's very, as you're well aware, complicated. From our vantage point up here, we're trying to approve stuff and watching stuff languish and not get built, and everything from financing issues, from interest rates to what financing institutions want to see developers put in cash, the risk aversion of developers, single employer population growth, adding to emotional risk and investment risk, to are we appropriately inventoried on what's missing and the ability to produce that with the developers and the financing vehicles that we have in our community. I'll stop there with the limited constraints. So I guess a couple of general questions and a couple of specific questions. So you talked about there at the end about the committee and ongoing and grappling with structure for stability and sustainability. I assume I can paraphrase that way, if that's okay. And so do I take it to mean the MCRP is going to continue to play a leadership role in this conversation?
Hopefully not, to be honest.
Okay.
We will, from my perspective, we definitely could help as a transition, whatever that may be. But in terms of leadership for the implementation, it would take a further conversation with the 3 governmental entities, to be honest, and to see what's the best way, and also reaching out to, as you all pointed out, from the state level, federal level, the developers. There has to be a conversation on the implementation, whatever format or structure it should be. There have to be conversation among all different sectors. And so, and I believe the implementation committee would only be successful, only all those different sectors are represented on this implementation committee. We've been looking at different models, just see what would be a successful model for regional housing plan type. We're looking at that. We've been looking at that, but we hope to have something more concrete, but not without first having conversations like with the town council, with the city council, the county board, the housing authority, and other key stakeholders to just see it's important. It's not just who's in charge, because this housing issue is a committee-wide. The solution won't be coming by one sector, as we see it. So, yeah, and our capacity, MCRPC staff, is pretty limited. We have a lot of major projects on our plate right now, including consolidated plan that affects housing. and really assisting the town and the city staff on the CDBG. But will definitely play some role, but I don't know about leadership role, to be honest. Yeah.
I think that later comment was probably one of the more substantial ones about making some focused community-wide. Obviously, we focus on the corporate boundaries of Normal and what happens inside of it and what we can do to make a difference and an impact, and as do the other bodies, and as they should. But I agree that it's good and important and right that we have a community-wide conversation. In my estimation, this is the most progress we've had in this conversation by what you're doing. I don't have an answer either what that mechanism is, but that was the kind of the first general question. In all this, was there any benchmarking done in your efforts to look at other communities in Illinois or your state service to, are people making progress? Are they figuring this out? And what's that looking like? And does that come out in the larger recommendations?
Yeah, as Mark mentioned, we look at Rockford area. I think Peoria have some kind of programs going on. We also looking at City of Houston. They're really successful program in terms of addressing homelessness. Although we cannot compare ourselves to the fourth largest city in the country, but I think if there are certain strategies that can be adopted, can be adjusted, scaled down to our level, we should be open to those types. So we're doing research looking Maricopa County, Arizona, that's another area. They have a regional council of governments that's also tackling the housing issue. We've been participating in the National Association of Regional Councils. They have a housing working group that also we've been participating in some of the conversations. So we're trying to learn really from others that have certain common characteristics to ours, like a regional issue, although we don't have like millions of population, but I think there's some principles that can be learned, lessons can be learned from them, because housing, as we all know, it's all over the country, different parts of the country.
So are those learnings from looking outward reflected in these recommendations, or is there a repository of this information or case studies, or not having read I skimmed through that report, but didn't have enough time between getting it and here.
The implementation, those we call it case studies, did not influence this.
Okay.
This happened first, but at the tail end, we start looking because we did not know that was the recommendation as part of the plan. So we've been looking the last couple months.
Okay, excellent. In that benchmarking we talked about, Mark, you mentioned incentives in parallel with growth. Perhaps we're behind that curve. Are there incentive types that you've seen that have been more successful, and are they reflected in recommendations or case studies as well for us to be able to refer to?
Yeah, so I'll say, give you, I believe it's starting at the last section here, under key recommendations, strategic recommendations.
There's certain slides that you can refer.
Not really, unfortunately.
And you can just say yes.
Essentially,
That's
there's
okay.
some case study. Yeah, no, I just wanted to give you some more concrete. But yeah, the strategic recommendations include some case studies as real life examples.
Perfect.
But yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you. And then I also, for whatever reason, honed in on number 5. So I've been hearing on and off just recently in DC conversations on housing, and the notion of the word partnership is interesting and flexibly defined. I'm coming to find out. where are employers in this equation?
We recognize the importance of especially major employers. As one of the slides, you saw the graph showing how Vivian, being the second largest employer in the area, they were involved in the plan steering committee. We continue to have conversation with them, but that's not the only one. We recognize the school districts also have to deal with the housing issues. We recognize that some other major employers may not be, the one that's the largest, but then there are some others that are growing ones that have the issue for their housing, for the housing for the employees, or just for some educational institutions trying to recruit faculty members. That's another issue that we may not be think about. Graduating PhD students from ISU, for example, and that's another sector. So there are a lot of employers that have been involved in conversations through, not just through this plan, but through other listening sessions or meetings that we have with them. So yes, they are on our radar.
And I apologize, I didn't ask a very good question. Let me ask a better one. In related to number 5 and funding.
Okay.
In your investigation, have you seen employers partner in funding ways of various descriptions that have been successful?
Other places. Okay. I can answer that, but you can too.
Yeah, do you want me to go first?
Go ahead.
You go ahead.
I've seen higher educational institutions that have housing assistance program. For example, Washington University in St. Louis, they have like down payment assistance for certain areas, certain neighborhoods that they will work with the employees, faculty members. So I've seen that, and I think there's another example. I forgot exactly where. Again, I think in the Chicago area that have something similar. Yes, there are examples out there in terms of the private sector. I think we are looking at.
Yeah, so with the, especially with the Housing Trust Fund, the financing of that, or the revenue streams is very flexible. And so you have some cities in the country like Burlington, Vermont, that just funds it outright through their municipal budget. You have other municipalities that is a public-private funded. And so it could be an incentive, an agreement with major employers to contribute X percent, whatever that may be, to make the Housing Trust Fund more viable and stronger, because it's definitely one of those tools that the more funding, the more effective. And in fact, some studies have shown that with a Housing Trust Fund, if it's not adequately funded, it actually does very, very little. So there's a threshold there where it would actually be fruitful and productive. And then with the Housing Trust Fund, again, you can have public-private individuals who are through an agreement or through an incentive, requirement, whatever that may be, whatever the will and the appetite is there, but definitely there's precedent for that.
Gentlemen, thank you again. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Mr. Preston.
Thanks, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Lai and Mr. Adams, for being here and presenting this. This is, I think, something that a lot of people in our community have been recognizing as an issue and a regional issue to the magnitude that you guys are describing here in the report. So I'm really glad to see this with some concrete goals and steps to go from here moving forward. Personally, I think that Mr. McCarthy's opening remark when he spoke a minute ago was exactly right, that there are a lot of units that we have passed up here that have worked their way through our process, but that are yet to, have shovels in the ground. And obviously there are a lot of factors for developers that go into getting a project from idea to completion, of course. And I'm glad that we as a town have, and as a council have seemingly not been a hindrance, as those have come through, and we've recognized that. I think that a statistic that is just, I want to throw back out there because it's, I mean, it really is significant, that it's estimated that 50 to 80% of Rivian employees have a one-way commute of 45 minutes or longer. And if my math is correct, if you want to use 8,000 as their number of current employees at normal, and that's 4,000 to 6,400. That is a large number of people, presumably on 74, but, however they'd be coming, that not, saying that if they had the chance, every one of those would move to this community, but that's quite a sizable number nonetheless, and I appreciate that being included in here. The only other thing I will say is the Chamber, McLean County Chamber of Commerce held an event with elected officials last week, and one of the things that they did as part of that program, there was council members from Normal, from the city of Bloomington, and then county board members from McLean County, of course, was go around to each elected official, and each of us were to identify one community issue that we thought the different governing bodies and others could work on together. And I would venture to say, I mean, certainly more than any other single issue, but I would venture to say it was probably a majority of every elected official, which most were in the room then, said housing as their answer. And so I hope that that gives you guys both reassurance and gives the general population some confidence as well that stuff like this is excellent research. I think by and large elected officials are on board with the severity of the situation that we face here regionally, and I really appreciate you guys bringing it here and hope that there's some concrete solutions then that we can take this and achieve together from here.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you both for being here again. I've been reading some articles that talk about revisiting some concepts that had been abandoned, like SROs and ADUs as an alternative housing unit. What type of situation do you see if we were to consider providing zoning opportunities for those types of units? What type of niche might they serve in your housing study?
In terms of the variety of housing types, definitely, because ADUs, accessory dwelling units, and then single family, attached or townhouse, different types, right? Because it really, for any individual or family or household, depending where the life stage is, then they would look for whatever housing that fits their needs. We, maybe a couple years ago, MCLPC staff did research, on say the ADUs, and we have some suggestions and ideas to city and town staff, just and the committee members, just to educate. We recognize it that the ADUs it would help to expand the alternate type housing types for the community. But we also recognize that existing neighborhoods, folks, the NIMBYism, not in my backyard mentality, might still exist, right? So there will be challenges, but it's also would take community education to overcome that. Maybe it's a certain part of local geography that may be more apt for those type of alternate housing, or maybe some transitional type housing between single family and multifamily. So definitely, I think it should be considered.
Well, in the article I was looking at, they were mentioning the reluctance of a retiree whose home was paid for, that they don't need their large house that they raise their family in, but the prospect of going from a low mortgage, low interest rate, possibly a paid-for house, to spend almost as much money as they're getting to get the right size unit for them, that if an ADU could be built on their own lot,
Mhm.
they could get rental income from the house that somebody else is using. So
Yes, yes.
it has some creative applications.
Yes.
Another idea is converting office space with so many employees now working from home.
Mhm.
And there is the complication because they're not designed with the plumbing in place and to service all the residents that you might want to put in there with their own baths and kitchens and so forth. But do you see that as a viable option for our area to consider?
I think definitely worth looking into seriously because the local government has the zoning control. And you meaning what is the city council, town council, for the unincorporated areas, the county board, you have the power to change that. So definitely I would encourage as like overlay district as one of the recommendations. And then in addition to ADUs, it actually should be further looked into and consider maybe further research by staff, maybe making recommendations to the council. And also, we are continuously also looking for grant opportunities. There might be some consultants, there might be some grants to allow some, to fund some consultants to review the zoning ordinance. And I believe may not be applied overall, because it's something maybe relatively new for this area, but it's not something new, say, in California, right? Of course, there are obstacles. I've recently have seen some videos about some obstacles for the cost of building ADUs. So there's always, like everything, there's pros and cons. So it need to be studied. It's not just, okay, let's do ADUs. We recognize lots of students living in this community, and so there might be some homeowners, they don't mind turning the garage, whether it's attached garage or upstairs independent units, or what people call the mother-in-law lofts and whatever, turning into some kind of livable dwelling unit. It needs to be more detailed looked at, but I would encourage you not to close that door, but just to have an open mind.
And finally, I was surprised to see computer workers on your list of people with housing challenges, because I think a number of people in the tech industry can work from home. So when you were looking at the housing here, is it possible that we have people that are contributing to our employers that are based here that are maybe working even out of state? And did your study get any data on that?
Yeah, did you?
So not so much on that exactly. The only thing I can think of off the top of my head that kind of rings true is we did pick up on a higher share of, yeah, you can see here. So this slide, sorry, the graph on the right is really calling out the net commuters by occupation from Lake Houston. So what you are seeing is most of those who are commuting are the assemblers and the fabricators. But there are commuter occupations that are commuting, and it really comes down to are there housing options that fit those salaries? And if they cannot find housing that's affordable, or it's not just convenience, it's lending requirements. Lenders won't lend you funding if you can't afford certain home options. So it's definitely part of that. We do know also there's a high share of single-family homes that are rented out, and many of those are owned by corporations and companies that are out of the region, and so we do have that as well. So, yeah.
And I did say it was the last question, but you joggled my memory. Do you know whether our community is being impacted by renting out houses for vacation use or temporary use, if that is reducing the available housing for permanent residents?
I don't think we look at like something like Airbnb type short-term rental. We haven't looked at that. Nor the consultant, the impact. Yeah.
Thank you.
But we know there's less and less Airbnb if you look units available because it's been taken up by many people.
And if I can also add, yeah, I think that was one area that we could have explored more, but we, just due to the scope of this. And I think one of the sections here that in the housing plan that I really would recommend that you look at outside of just the strategic recommendations is the demand for housing section, and really shows that updates the EDC numbers that I know we've discussed. So the plan says about roughly 8,000 units short, and there are it outlines what the assumptions there are. So we know there's about 8,000 units short total, and we also did analysis on specifically a permanent supportive housing demand, and of course that is very challenging, but based on some best practice formula, we estimate about 300 for the county, and both of those numbers are for McLean County specifically. So we have some benchmarks, we have some numbers here, but what it ultimately gets to is trying to find innovative ways to tackle this number, not just sheer construction, and I think that the plan does lay out that.
Thank you.
Lorenz?
Thank you. This is a topic that I kind of see coming and going on my days because it very much is a part of my day job with United Way, and then obviously we tackle these issues here, in this space. So I wanted to just provide some thoughts about the report, which is first and foremost very comprehensive, and I applaud you all for that and the consultant that you worked with. I often talk about the various aspects of this problem. A housing problem is not a monolith. I mean, it ranges everything from shelter issues to permanent supportive housing to workforce housing to diversity and market stock. And, at this space, we tend to talk more about diversity and market stock. Maybe to a lesser extent, we talk about some of the safety net issues. Biggest thing to date that I think we've taken a step on the safety net was to help through our ARPA funds, help fund the Housing Navigator. So as we go forward, I think we have to keep in mind the multiple facets of this issue, and then where we as staff and council can impact policy. And that policy might be things like, developers of market level housing to lower barriers for them to make a project pencil out. It might also be some zoning changes. So those are things we might be asked to tackle here. We might also be asked to tackle some more safety net issues. Getting a lot of headlines is the growing cluster of campers in a tent encampment. What role does government play there? So I think these are the things that we have to think about more than just diversity of housing stock. We have to think about the whole range of housing issues. And then, we were talking about state intervention and federal intervention. Our own representative of some of our area, at least, Darren LaHood, helped to sponsor and put forth a bill that is improving, I believe it's the low-income tax credit. So that was a landmark piece. But then right on its heels is a looming decision by our Supreme Court about the legality of tent encampments on public property. That's a case out of Oregon. So we need to really stay abreast of the issues happening not only nationally, but then also in our own backyard. So I think that's all I wanted to mention. I applaud you guys for this study and for the presentation tonight.
Thank you.
Further comments or questions? I'll just add a few points. I think, we're all very aware, and I think we were made aware tonight that it's going to be up to us to be a significant part of the solution going forward in collaboration and cooperation with our other community partners, City of Bloomington, McLean County, to address this issue. And the issues we're facing every municipality in the United States is facing. But I think we're just a little further down the curve because we have such accelerated growth from new industry that's coming into the community. You know, and the issue I hear day in and day out, it's a three-legged stool. It's the cost of housing. It's the cost of construction. It's the inability to get financing for projects. And it's the inability to get labor to actually do the work in housing. And these are huge problems that we're going to have to address, and it's not going to be anything we can do quickly. But I think our solution needs to be collaborative with our other partners, and we need to get to it. So thank you for your presentation tonight.
Thanks very much.
Before adjournment, we do have one public commenter, Maggie Hayes, if you'd like to come forward.
So speaking of housing, I've asked for 6 minutes. Do I have 6 minutes? Since we're group?
You want to identify the group you're representing?
Pardon?
If you'd identify the group you're representing.
There are 4 of us here from Charlotte Drive. That's a yes?
Sure.
Okay. We're here, again, about Class Act Realty properties. I've sent emails and pictures for 6 weeks to all of you, as well as Ryan Otto and Greg Trommel. Charlotte Drive is a block long, and these are the 5 worst driveways. You all have seen these pictures. This one is kind of the cream of the crop. This is between 2 of their buildings where they have sump pumps draining into the drive, onto the sidewalk, and into the street. This is what it looks like every single day. Every day. It's always draining, always wet. As I understand it, they have an obligation to maintain their properties through the town ordinances. They have an obligation to maintain their properties, to not allow standing water, to not create blight, or to contribute to the deterioration of neighborhoods. This is a 1-block street, and these are the 5 worst drives, all Class Act properties. And we've gotten no response. I emailed you all today what I was going to present this evening and asked that we'd be given some information as to what's going to happen with these, because we've heard nothing from Ryan Otto or Greg Trommel. And you are their enforcers, so.
Continue with your comment. This is public comment. This is not a place to have a conversation about this issue.
Okay, well, I'd asked that maybe we'd get some information today, this evening. You have no information for us?
Since you just now asked, no.
Well, I didn't just now ask. We've been asking for 6 weeks, so. All right, so I'll go on to the other issue, which is the swamp area between Charlotte Drive and the Constitution Trail. Something happened about 10 years ago that allowed a stoppage of the flow of water. And every time it rains, there's a foot, 2 feet of standing water abutting the Constitution Trail that runs about half the length of between Shelbourne and Lincoln. And this is an issue, too, that's been before, at least Mayor Cruz before. I know that you visited one of the neighbors and observed this, so we'd also like to see that dealt with. So I had asked that we get some information, but you're telling me there is nothing. Can we expect some response?
We'll provide the information we can, but
Pardon?
We will provide the information that we can, that we're aware of, but not at public comment.
Okay, you'll respond to me as to what will happen?
Staff will respond to you.
Pardon?
Staff will respond to you on these
As to what will
questions.
happen with these issues? Okay, thank you.
Before taking a motion for adjournment, are there concerns or comments? Mr. McCarthy?
I'm just going to take a quick minute, Mayor. Thank you. Several community members recently got back from the One Voice trip to Washington, D.C. Mayor and Ms. Reese were also there. Just wanted to highlight 32, I think, community members from all governments, private industry, service industry, went out as one voice to advocate for projects back in our community. It's an excellent opportunity. We met with Representatives Sorensen and LaHood and Senators Durbin and Duckworth to be able to have their undivided attention in a room and talk about what's important to us in Bloomington Normal is a great opportunity for us and well worth that opportunity. We also had the opportunity to talk with and meet with representatives from the Department of Labor, the Department of Education, the Department of Transportation to also make our case for those efforts. And beyond the meetings and the presentations and the insights from our elected representatives about how and the priority in the relative scheme of things of what they get asked for was the opportunity for a diverse cross-section of people from across our community to get together and have conversations about what's important and what's going on here. And so if you don't know about the One Voice trip, I encourage you to learn more about it. But it is always an eye-opening and interesting and educational opportunity and a good opportunity for us to make a case to bring our tax dollars right back here to Bloomington Normal. Thank you.
Mr. Preston?
Thanks, Mayor. I will be quick. Two quick things. One, I do think that I know there's been a lot of dialogue back and forth, but continued communication with the public commenter tonight, I think, is an important piece that will hopefully be helpful to the residents who are here tonight and who face the situation there on Charlotte every day. Second thing is this coming weekend is ISU's commencement, so just a congratulations to those who either themselves or family members or friends will be celebrating a big accomplishment and moving on to a new chapter in life. And also a reminder to everybody who will not be, but who will experience the increase in traffic and visitors to the community this weekend. Thanks.
Ms. Lorenz?
I'll keep it brief, but thank you, Mr. Preston, for acknowledging our public commenter, and I echo your advocacy for some action taken there to follow up. The other point I want to say is about the chamber event that was a week ago that brought together Bloomington council members with Normal council members with the county board, and it really was a very effective use of a fifth Monday. And yes, housing was a topic of concern, as was mental health, and those two actually kind of go very much together. And, you know, so to that end, to put maybe a bow on some of my comments about the housing presentation we had tonight, this is an opportunity to really look at an issue that's not a Bloomington problem, just because the tent encampment is in primarily Bloomington. It's not a Bloomington problem or a challenge. You know, the issues maybe facing that might be unique to us is not just a normal issue. Housing at all of its facets is a Bloomington Normal issue. And I'd like to build, I hope we can build upon the enthusiasm from a week ago to come together and collaborate and really embrace this issue as a time, almost existential moment to work together.
Thank you. Motion for adjournment, please.
So moved.
Second.
Please call the roll.
Mrs. Lorenz?
Aye.
Ms. Harris?
Aye.
Mr. Byers?
Aye.
Ms. Smith?
Aye.
Mr. Preston?
Aye.
Mr. McCarthy?
Aye.
Mayor Coos?
Aye. We are adjourned.